Okay, our third module is research, and of course, you guys know that you can have a whole course on research. So I'm just gonna kind of hit the high notes and not get too deep in the weeds here, and then we're going to end up talking about the kind of research you'll be doing for your project, which will probably, hopefully, be subject line testing in your emails against your different segments, and MailChimp will help you do that. So, research. First of all, obviously, research is information about consumers mostly, but it also, in secondary research, is information about industry, competitors, companies, things like that. We're not really going to talk about secondary research, though, today. And I like to start off kind of, far back and looking at kind of the big picture. And to me, research is knowledge, and in business, knowledge is power. And research also, quantitative research is scientific. And so you need to really think about yourselves whenever you're doing quantitative research, subject line testing or whatever, or large surveys of customers with very big sample sizes, the kinds of things we see. Political polls, for instance, are quantitative research with large sample sizes, and they give very definitive answers to how people feel about things at a certain point in time. But research is scientific. Okay. Okay, yes, you normally will start with secondary research on a project, but again, we're not really going to talk about that much today. Primary research is often pretty expensive, particularly when you're talking about large-scale surveys and interviews of consumers. This can cost tens of thousands and more dollars. And also, applying it and doing it the right way requires skill. You need to know about statistics. You need to know, importantly, about how to write a questionnaire so that you don't bias the results. And there's a real art to that. So again, qualitative research is also primary research, but qualitative research is like focus groups, and there are small sample sizes. And these types of things, as in focus groups, you tend to get in very in depth. You actually get in dialogue with specific consumers and people, and you hear them talk about a subject. So the kind of feedback you get can't really be put in on an Excel chart. It's a lot of words, it's quotations, so the kinds of things, the feedback you get in qualitative research is feedback on creative and new ideas, new ways of saying things, but it needs to be taken as being directional, in the sense that you don't get really firm, hard, fast, reliable answers. You need to go with bigger sample sizes for that. Large sample size, as I said before, with quantitative research, the questionnaire or no part of the method can influence results. So, and normally you are testing one variable at a time. That's the safest way to do it. And I also like to underline with my classes that when you're looking at finding out about a business, and you talk about, let's talk to our customers, let's research our end users. If you have a product that's sold at retail, you also want to spend some time doing research at retail, meaning you want to visit retailers, you want to look at how the product is positioned, where is it on the shelf, how many sizes are there competitors around it, if it's a grocery item, for instance. You're going to talk to the people, if you can, at the store about what they know about the product and whether it moves or not. So there's a lot of learning to be gotten at a retail environment too. So I want to talk about knowledge as power a little bit, and this is me just taking a little sideline here, trying to give you a little advice for your careers going forward. Knowledge is power is actually said by Sir Francis Bacon. He was an English citizen back a little before the time of our pilgrims. think in the early 1600s he lived. Knowledge itself is power. So one of my favorite books in advertising, and I encourage you guys who are really interested in advertising and marketing, and presumably pretty much all of you are, to look up someone by the name of David Ogilvy. He was the founder of an ad agency called Ogilvy and Mather, which still exists. Ogilvy and Mather is part of the WPP group, which is the biggest conglomeration of agencies, because a gentleman by the name of Martin Sorrell, who's a Brit, by the way, bought Ogilvy and Mather. He bought Young and Rubicam. He bought Gray Advertising. He bought a number of big agency groups, international groups, and has put together a group of groups. Okay. And so now the ad agency business is dominated by 3 or 4 of these groups of groups. Publicis is another one. So, but Ogilvy and Mather, David Ogilvy wrote some books. Confessions of an Advertising Man is one of them. But any book he's written about advertising and marketing is worth looking at, even though it was written a long time ago. There's some great pieces of advice in there. He was a brilliant advertising guy. And to that end, if you're going to work on a piece of business, you see this piece where it says do your homework. If you're going to work on a piece of business, you're not going to be successful unless you really study the product you're going to advertise. The more you know about it, the more likely you are to come up with a big idea for selling it. So he got the Rolls-Royce account, which some of you, hopefully most of you know, is a very expensive car. It's been made since the early 1900s in England. When he got that account, he spent weeks reading about the car. He looked at the manual, read the manual in detail. He went to dealerships. He did everything he could. He got the car. He drove it. So whatever product or service you're working on, you want to know more about it than anybody else. If you're selling a hardware device, you need to pretty much be able to take it apart and put it together like a soldier would a rifle, blindfolded. You need to arm yourself, particularly when you're the junior person on a piece of business, with what we used to call a fact book back when I started working on Procter & Gamble business. That's Saatchi & Saatchi. That is, you put together a big notebook of important information about the business so that if questions come up in meetings, you'll actually be able to come up with the answer or open the book and show your boss where it is so he or she can come up with the answer. Past advertising campaigns, why can't you put storyboards of past commercials that have run? When did they run? How much media weight was behind them? What's your media plan this year? What about last year and the year before that and the year before that? What are the trends on your business? Have you been selling more or less? What is your market share? What are competitors' advertising campaigns? You should have copies of those you can show people. When did they go on air? Where are they running? These are the kinds of things. What about the latest research? What's the biggest omnibus, the big omnibus study? Have a copy of that so you can look. Anyway, you get the idea. If you're the person in the room who's the smartest on the business, particularly as the youngest person on the business, you're going to get a lot of respect and you're going to move ahead. So, if you have insights backed by research that opens new doors or windows for the business, you're going to win. Understanding the consumer, her issues, where is she on the purchase funnel? How will we move her? Where do we want her to go? Do not forget what happens at retail. And I just want to make another point here. This is another little reality piece of knowledge for you. There's something that cropped up in the ad agency business. A number of you said you wanted to work at ad agencies. I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, they established a new function. So in addition to creative people, media people, account people, they added planners, account planning. And the account planner is usually a very smart marketer. In the beginning, a lot of them had British accents because it started there. And the account planner knows all about the research, knows all about the research on the business, and can look at any ad or any strategy and evaluate it against what is known about the consumer. Why do we use research? Research definition here is the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. It's scientific. It adheres to scientific principles, and you can read about that here. That's how research should be done. Validation of facts and cause-effect relationships, etc. Now, okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute because we've done a little over 10 minutes on research. And what I want everybody to do is to stand up wherever you are and stretch your arms up to the ceiling or up to the sky, depending on where you are, and get up on your toes, stretch out your back, stretch out your spine. Take a second to do that and really feel a line going through the tips of your fingers right down to your toes. You're stretching that line up, 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 up. And now I want you to slowly kind of roll your back down. Bring your arms down, roll your back down. Roll it down slowly until you are putting your hands as close to the floor as you can get them. You've rolled your back over, and now you're just going to gently kind of bounce your upper body and kind of stretch that middle of your back out, the part that hurts when you've been sitting a long time. And just take a second and do that. And when you have finished that, we are going to go along and finish up this research section, which is somewhat of a long section. Okay, and the scientific method is down here at the bottom in the slide, problem solving. The step-by-step approach, identifying, defining a problem, getting the data, getting a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis until you find a solution. Now, whoops, I think I jumped ahead here a little bit. I apologize. Some examples of research, of course, is in the lab, where you've got, and you think about reading about medical research when they're trying out a new drug, how they give one group of people the new drug. They read that group of people against people who don't take any drug or any pill. And then, of course, they have another group that takes a placebo. Why do they take a placebo? Raise your hand if you know the answer to that. Okay, and you know it's because that there are two things that happen when you take a pill. There are two things that actually have an effect on you. One, potentially is whatever's in the pill, the chemicals will have an effect on you. Number one. And number two, the act of taking a pill has a psychological effect on people, making them think they're going to get better. And so a placebo is a pill that doesn't have any chemical in it. And by reading the placebo group against the group that take the actual drug in the pill, against people who don't do anything, you will wipe out the placebo effect and just look at the effect of the chemical in the drug. Okay, research. Political polling is research. Here's an example of one that came out a few years ago. And now I like to do a lecture on Gregor Mendel. Those of you who've had me before have seen this already. And I do it because it's just a classic example of real research, biological research. And it's real scientific research. And really quickly, Gregor Mendel wanted to see, he was looking for whether traits would be passed down from parents to children, and what traits would be passed down. So he bred purple pea plants to white pea plants. They only come in two colors, purple and white. And in the first generation, they were all purple. So his hypothesis was then that purple is the dominant characteristic between purple and white. And then he selfed each purple plant that was in the second generation, allowing pollen from each flower to fall on its own stigma. And he had all these seeds, 929. He plants them all. And guess what? In the second generation, he gets a 3-1 ratio, mostly purple with some white. And he saw the same thing with all the other characteristics